Hello and a very warm welcome to the brand new edition of Policy Watch. I'm Kriti Mishra. Today we've moved beyond the confines of RSTV studios in the national capital, streaming to you from Andhra Pradesh's Visakhapatnam. And in this episode, we'll take a closer look at the National Mineral Policy 2019. This policy will ensure effective regulation and sustainable development of the mining sector. And Andhra Pradesh is one of the storehouses of mineral wealth in India. So let's begin the discussion. And on the show, joining me is Mr. K. Kumar Raja, Vice Chairman, Andhra Pradesh Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And also joining me is Mr. Naresh, President of Vizag Development Council. Mr. Raja, let me come to you first. Because of geological formations, Andhra Pradesh contains rich and variety of industrial minerals and also building stones. How important is national mineral policy for Andhra Pradesh in particular and for the country in general?
Firstly, we welcome the national policy on the minerals, which is taken up by the Government of India, National Mineral Policy 2019. From Chamber of Commerce side, we welcome it. As you rightly said, Andhra Pradesh has got a lot of potential. It is a mineral-rich state, has got a lot of minerals, natural resources, has got 1,000 kilometers of coastline, and our state is the power surplus. So, transporting the minerals through water channels is much cheaper and economical than the conventional methods. So, that will boost up the economy. Next, it comes to the processing of the minerals. As well, we can do the processing in Andhra Pradesh and we send it because we have the surplus power. And industry and entrepreneur wise, our state has got many number. So, all over India, if you look at it, most of the entrepreneurs are from Andhra Pradesh. So, a lot of potential is there for the Andhra Pradesh.
Mr. Naresh, how will this policy ensure sustainable development of the mining sector and also address the problems and the issues of people residing in the tribal areas?
See, as you are aware, both in Andhra Pradesh and in India, most of the minerals are in hilly regions or places where tribals are there, where development has not taken place. Either physical infrastructure is not there or even the social infrastructure is not in place. Unfortunately, lack of a proper mining policy and proper regulation has led to illegal mining and people excavating and exploiting tribals. With the new national mineral policy in place, one of the best points is protecting the interest of tribals. They come out with a policy called National Mineral Development Fund for the District Development Fund. So, every district where you mine minerals, they are setting up a mineral fund. You have to pay royalty. Suppose it was 2015, it was earlier to 2015, you have to pay 30% of the entire proceeds as royalty for the development of the district. That's a fantastic feature brought out by this Modi government. If it is after 2015, you pay 10% because the value of, you may ask why it's only 10%, because the value of the auction proceeds are much higher in 2015 because of the transparency and better auction proceeds. The volume of money that's coming in is multiple times compared to the earlier auction, this thing. So, they have come out with a frame that 10% of the entire revenue earned from the mining is given to the district. It's imagine, not the country, not the state, to the particular district where it's mining is taking place.
Right.
So, the 10% fund from the 2015 policy and earlier to that is 30% royalty. This alone, they have collected around 3,500 crores of money is available for helping the district develop and helping the project displaced people. Let me take the example of Orissa, which has got the highest amount of district mineral fund. Just in 30 districts of Orissa, they have collected close to 1,450 crores, this fund. So, as you know, Orissa is one of the most backward states in the country. The utilization of this fund is specifically targeted for the district, and the Prime Minister has come out with a specific scheme called the PM KKY scheme. This helps improve the not only the basic amenities like water, reducing pollution, increasing healthcare in that local area, increasing education levels, creating skill levels among the population, and also about sustainable development. Sustainable development is also created a concept of not only this mineral fund, but also intergeneration equity. When you call about intergenerational equity, they're also setting up a fund, not only this generation, but future generations also will be taken care. Because if you just exploit this wealth now and destroy the environment, the future generations are impacted. So there is a study being done, what will be the impact of this mining on the future generations and what we can do to protect it. So they are putting in steps to see that these people are also developing. The local area is being developed because of, even though the minerals are bought throughout the country or exported also, first the district develops. That's a outstanding achievement. If you see, if 30% of the revenue is going only for development of a district, you will not see over-exploitation of resources. And when that kind of fund is put into place, you will have knowledgeable people coming into there and then sustainable development happening where people will see that the environment is not destroyed. If you see some areas earlier in like Karnataka where illegal mining was happening, they used to destroy the environment completely. They just used to dig up. The water levels used to go down, the pollution levels used to go up, villages used to be affected. All these things cannot happen now because there is a fund not only to develop, that also to bring in awareness levels and to improve the skill level. Once knowledge comes into the area, it is not possible to exploit people. Exploitation happens when education doesn't happen. So large part of the expenditure also in educating these people and also imparting skill to them. I feel this is the most significant part. Transporting it by waterways, reducing taxes, rationalizing taxes, one part. But actually empowering the district, like I said, in India, the highest amount of fund out of 3,500 crores, only 1,500 crores has gone to Orissa, which is the most backward state. So I think this is a very good initiative, and the earlier also this was there, but the utilization is now done through the PM-KKY scheme, where at least 60% goes only for creation of basic infrastructure. The 40% goes for sustainable thing, like, for irrigation, allied areas to bring in a holistic development in that area. So they are not only talking about the healthcare and sanitation, but also to improve irrigation facilities in that area. 40% of the fund is earmarked for that. So they have clear-cut benchmarks, 60% for water supply, healthcare, sanitation, 40% for agriculture and so overall development. So I think this policy, you have to commend the government for coming out with the policy. Only thing is, if you implement it properly, I think this will be very good for the economic progress of not only the district and the particular state, but for the entire country.
So it is important to ensure that the fruits of development percolate downwards. But there's also another important feature, Mr. Raja, of this policy. And this policy talks about granting industry status to the mining activity. Now, how important is industry status for the development of the mining sector?
Yeah, this will definitely will help. This policy had given the provision to give the excess resources which is lying with public sector to the private sector, which public sector could not utilize. The private sector can make use of it and bring more output. That way it will help. And secondly, once the entrepreneur goes for institutional finance or bank finance, if it is industry status, it's much easy to get. And many companies can merge and become a giant company. Merging is possible.
So access to finance will become easier. Talking about another major highlight, and that is of mineral corridors. Now, Mr. Naresh, this policy talks about creating mineral corridors in India. What's the roadmap ahead for creating such corridors?
I think that's a good initiative of talking about mineral corridors. Is first you identify which states are rich in minerals and then create a corridor for easy transportation of goods through the mineral corridors. Earlier we had movement of cargo either through national highways or airports or ports. Now this national mineral new policy talks about using inland coastal corridors and waterways for transportation of goods. So once there's an effective master plan in place, like I said, there are 12 big states in India which are mineral rich out of the 29 states. All 29 states don't have. So if you focus on 90% of the minerals come from 12% of the states. If these 12 states are integrated wherever possible through the inland waterways or the port-led development, obviously they're connected by the national highway. So the point we talked about is the mineral corridors are in two categories. One connected by rail, connected by road, connected by ports. The fourth element is the inland waterways, which has not yet taken off so far.
Right.
Once that takes off, you will have cost of transportation being less, cost of pollution being less, and bringing down the cost of minerals in the eventual and increasing our export revenue. So the national mineral corridors, when they are defined, it will facilitate easier movement of cargo and also consolidation of warehouses, like where you need to stock, from which port you will develop. So I think now each state and each institutional player had his own way. Like suppose I have a mine in Visakhapatnam, I will just send it off to through Visakhapatnam port. One mine in Orissa will send it through Orissa port. One in Gujarat. So integrated policy will also lead to warehousing. You will have in the national mineral corridor, you will have warehouses at important points in important ports, on important national highways, on important national waterways. So you can have, when you import, there will be some import component, this is some export component, some finished product which will involve. So overall, in a holistic policy, when you both import and export, this national mineral corridor will facilitate, I feel, lower transportation cost, better utilization of resources, better storage facilities, and faster output if it's tracked on a national level instead of being tracked at a local, state level or entrepreneur level. So national mineral corridor, I would definitely recommend there's a separate task force put up for seeing that actually benefits are passed on so the nation benefits. Earlier, there was no proper tracking, like each state had a different policy, each entrepreneur was tracking. But in the national corridor, you can actually track where the minerals are getting delayed, which ports are delaying it up, where there are bottlenecks. For example, most of the minerals are in tribal areas. How can we facilitate movement of minerals from tribal area to the mainland through waterway or through the railway, through rail network or road network or port-led network? So this kind of planning, if it's done at the national level, that information can be percolated down and the funds can be, for example, if National Highways, Mr. Nitin Gadkari is involved, if we tell him that even though there is not much transport in from one area to one area, there's a lot of revenue coming into the country if we facilitate movement of this cargo. A new national highway or a new state highway may be sanctioned for that area. Similarly, if you go to the railways minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, there is no need for a railway line because there is no passenger movement in that area. But if you know there are huge minerals lying in that area and that minerals need to be moved out for better realization of money, and there are thousands of crores of money. In fact, if you see Visakhapatnam railway zone, 90% of the revenue comes from cargo, only 10% comes from passenger traffic. So if the government knows that because of the mineral corridor, minerals can be evacuated either through a rail line which is much cheaper directly to the port.
Right.
So this way, facilitation of a national mineral corridor will involve the Ministry of Shipping, Ministry of Highways, Ministry of Railways, working integratedly, where you will exactly know where the revenue is, how much of revenue is coming, and you can prioritize. Earlier you never knew, because if Orissa politician asks you, they make a railway zone may go to Orissa. If Andhra politician asks, you may get a railway line for Andhra. There you can have a transparent policy of which district is contributing the highest revenue to the nation, and you can prioritize either your rail network or a road network or a port network to that area to see that cargo and resources are allocated both for integrated development of that area and faster evacuation from that area.
So a task force must be set up for developing mineral corridors in the country. Mr. Raja, Mr. Naresh mentioned about Mineral Development Fund. Now, how will this policy ensure effective utilization of that fund?
Basically, it is from the bureaucracy level. There should be transparency. Everything should be put on the net. So even entrepreneurs can see and government also can watch.
Right.
So that transparency will come and district funds can be utilized properly.
And also, sir, how important is database maintenance for the progress of this sector?
Acquiring data and consolidating it and putting in one place, definitely it will help the entrepreneurs and as well as to the government, and it will help the entrepreneurs to have a transparent bidding, and every entrepreneur can know where exactly which type of mineral is available, and they can plan the industry accordingly. Database is the basic requirement for any activity.
Also, Mr. Naresh, there's a lot of focus on encouraging private partnership. How will this policy ensure private participation in exploration?
See, government sector exploitation generally in the government is now moving towards the core areas. Money has to come in from the private sector. One particular area is earlier public sector units or government units had access to natural resources, but they were not utilizing this for some reason. Right. This new mineral policy has said that whichever public sector enterprise has access to vast amounts of natural reserves and which are not being utilized for the last few years or few decades will be put to auction by the government or the PSU for opening up for private sector investment. Private sector is obviously profit driven but also efficiency driven.
Right.
So if you have large amounts of minerals and natural resources not being exploited, when especially the country needs money for, for empowering, for creating employment or for improving the health care, you cannot allow just people to sleep on natural resources. So earlier there were some publics, because of lack of money or lack of decision making, Private sector brings in both faster decision making, faster access to capital, and speedy implementation, and faster import-export. So opening up of areas which were earlier not there, and also granting industry status, giving them access, and now the government allowed two mining companies to merge. They allowed takeover of mining companies. They allowed Indian mining companies to take over assets abroad, globally. Now we have access to global capital. So by allowing private entrepreneurs to do these things in a transparent manner, it is open for every Indian, patriotic Indian citizen to use his intelligence and the facilities the government of India has given to actually exploit these resources for benefit of the nation and for benefit of the entire population. So earlier this was not being done because of lack of decision making and lack of funding. Sometimes people did not have access to funds. Now they have access to both, and they have access to policy. Now the difference is they have access to policy making, which they are allowed to. Now they have access to funds, giving an industry status. They can merge, and they have also access to assets which were blocked for public sector. Now they're opened up for private sector in a transparent manner. So nobody can excuse anybody that one particular person is being favored because it's a transparent online auction. So it's freeing up, bringing natural resources to public good. So that way, a private entrepreneur, by his faster decision making, by his intelligence, and by his ability to raise funds at a very competitive, global competitive rate, which a PSU may not have been able to do it quickly. So an entrepreneur can raise global funds and also access his contacts, use his resources to tie up with foreign people quickly and export these materials and cash in on the global boom whenever it occurs. I think that way this policy has done a lot to empower private sector to utilize the resources of this country.
But there's another important component, and that is of taxation. Mr. Raja, how will this policy harmonize taxes, levies and royalties and also make the entire tax structure very stable?
Yeah, with the introduction of GST, almost it is harmonized. Because earlier we used to have custom duty, excise duty and road tax and all these things. Now, the one tax, one nation, it has come. But still this royalty part of it, most of the states, different states have different rate of royalties. I think that is one point government has to think, and they have to bring a rationalized rate of the royalties. That will have uniform idea for the entrepreneur to bid anywhere without much depth of investigation on it.
Also, this policy talks about a long-term export and import policy for this sector. How will that incentivize large-scale commercial mining in the country?
See, long-term export policy can be drawn up first if you understand what you have, and then how you mine what you have, and then how you move them across and how you can. So the first thing they have done is, you talked about databases earlier. They're creating the national database of all the minerals we have. If we have gold in Karnataka, why are we importing gold?
Right.
I'll give you an example. Suppose we are importing tons and tons and tons of gold because gold is cheaper to import than to produce here. And we also put a 10% import duty. If you have the long-term export policy, first you have to reduce the imports and increase the imports. So even if the cost of mining this gold is slightly higher than the global cost, government benefits by fuel costs, by GST. If you provide some subsidy or additional incentive for goods which are being import substitutes. Suppose the Commerce Ministry comes up with a policy of import substitution. Every year, suppose we are importing thousands and thousands of tons of gold. Because our cost of production of gold, if you actually mine here, is little higher than if somebody is mining in Australia. So far, we don't have a policy that why should we buy gold and send out our entire money out of this country for buying gold at 30 lakhs a kilo. So we are sending out 30 lakh rupees for every kg of gold we are importing from Australia or from a mine in South Africa. Suppose it was costing us 32 lakhs to actually mine that. So because we are 5 to 10% higher, we are not mining that, and because this mine is going to shut down, and we are allowing import of gold. If the government subsidizes, the Commerce Ministry subsidizes this gold cost by 2 lakhs, you will save 30 lakhs going out of this country.
Right.
You understood what I meant? So, you need two things, not only boosting the exports, but also curtailing exports, and also coming up with a policy for import substitution. First, if you create the database of all the minerals available in the country, and why these minerals, in spite of being in the country, are being allowed import into this country. Why are they being allowed import into this country? Because they are available globally at a cheaper rate than if you mine them in India. But if they are only, if the cost of mining in India is only 10 to 20% higher than importing them. Instead of allowing the entire 100% of our money going out for importing this metal, if we subsidize this by 10-20%, the government anyway makes this 10-20% when the people use their fuel, or they use they pay state taxes, or their employees pay taxes. The employment generation and the money generated to the government of India will be offset by the 10-20% subsidy they provide. So as a first step, I would recommend the entire database, which is anyway, it's a good thing they're making the database of all the minerals in this country. Then you should make a database of all the minerals that are being imported to this country and the database of materials being exported out of this country. Now, why are we importing some minerals which we can mine in this country? So why is the cost of mining higher? What makes the cost of mining higher? Suppose the cost of wages is higher. Now we have this MNREGA scheme, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment. You are giving funds to farm laborers. You can give that money to the mining sector. So that another policy like the MNREGA policy, where you actually subsidize directly into the mining workers' account without giving it to the company. So the cost of mining comes down, and this is import substitute. You create a fund for subsidizing and bring a stop to all minerals that are available in the country but are not being exploited because they cost higher to exploit them, either because the power cost is high, or because the cost of labor is high, or because the state taxes are high. There are only three areas, or the cost of mining equipment is high. You subsidize any other way. You cut down the power cost, you cut down the labor cost, you cut down the cost of equipment or subsidize the cost of equipment, automatically the cost of mineral falls down. So automatically our entire foreign exchange is saved. I don't think the government has made much effort in this direction where you stop all import of minerals which are available in India. If you go in this direction, you need to create a comprehensive study of the database and also the cost of mining and how to substitute this and where to substitute it so that the government does not get a bad name. Entrepreneurs have this habit of trying to exploit the government at every possible, so government should be wary. But definitely this is one area through your Rajya Sabha TV, I would definitely recommend to the government. This will help the government save precious foreign exchange. Just by subsidizing by 10-15% in most cases, you will save the 100% of the money going out of this country in the first aspect. In the second aspect, you talked about how can we improve the export potential of this. The export potential of all the minerals is definitely boosted by preventing this loot and scoot. This loot and scoot scheme comes in where illegal mining is happening. You dig up the resources fast, you leave that area in a mess and you scoot from that area. We have seen in the previous few years people doing that. Now, because of the sustainable model which they have brought in, where the entire environment is protected, you bring in sustainable development, you protect the rights of tribals, you make the mining more long-term by, reducing the cost of transportation, reducing the cost of taxes, helping them access to global finance, giving them industry status. This is a series of small steps, bringing in GST, demonetization by curbing in black money. Now you do transactions in white, you pay all the states have a uniform tax, and then you create better highways. The government has invested lakhs of money in national highways, and you also created a more beautiful, robust rail network. And now you want to utilize in the next 5 years, maybe the inland waterways. What all this will do, the cumulative effect will be, you can see this benefit in 2 to 3 years' time. Waterways may take 3 to 4 years. But what they've invested in national highways, what they've invested in port-led development, what they've done in the cargo-led movement. Still, every area we can improve. And also making the database and making this sector open up to private sector where they can actually use faster decision making and faster access to capital to take out these minerals, transport these minerals faster and help them export them by creation of warehouses and better ports. All this will definitely boost employment and also improve our foreign exchange and also make India a global powerhouse. But all this is rolling out in 2019. This policy, earlier policy was in 2008. It was 11 years back. The Supreme Court had to intervene to have this policy in place. The policy has just come into place. And now again the new government will come into place. So once you actually set up a honest, good bureaucratic team to actually implement this policy, most of the governments have excellent policies on paper. But once you have a task force, like I said, to actually implement this policy, to go into detail, to talk to stakeholders, to talk to state governments, to ask them where you need more money. You need more railway wagons. For example, Visakhapatnam, it's always a constraint to have railway wagons. We are always having short of wagons. Cargo is delayed by 1 week, at least due to shortage of wagons. Bottleneck in the ports because wagons are not available. So if there is an integrated policy where the railways talks to the national highways talks to the ports, and ports talk to the entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs talks to the banks. So in case there is no non-performing asset because of delay in movement of cargo. So everything is integrated. So once you have a proper policy, till now Andhra Pradesh have a power deficit state. We could not process minerals for 5 years. After the BJP and the TDP government came together, this became a power surplus state. Now all our airports are expanding. More than 50% we have growth in passenger traffic. Rail traffic is increasing. National highways have increased. All our ports are doing, we are in the top 5 ports in the country. So then you can exploit these minerals. But the local level districts have still not developed. Once you actually develop the local level districts, and like I said, have a proper evacuation plan for this in the shortest possible time at the lowest cost. That will happen when the inland waterways also trick in. But you actually talk to the entrepreneurs to find out where his bottlenecks are, where he is being held up. Is it because of bureaucratic problems or because we have a bad judiciary? Where in India, in ease of doing business, I'll tell you, to boost the, we need 2 more areas. I think one is reducing corruption among the bureaucracy. Political corruption, Mr. Modi has cleaned up. If you reduce corruption among the bureaucracy and also speed up the judicial reforms. In India, in ease of doing business, we have jumped quite a few places now, but in judicial ranking, we have not. Out of 170 countries, we're at 160. It takes 5 years to settle a dispute in this country. Like either if the government goes to court or the entrepreneur goes to court, it takes 5 years and 40% of the amount involved in dispute resolution. So one thing we can resolve is for exclusively, because these minerals are a focus area, I would expect that if the government sets up fast-track courts, at least where our minerals and disputes are, and it's resolved in 5 to 6 months, I think that will ease, because a lot of people go to court for silly reasons. I'm talking about entrepreneurs also at the private level. So if there are fast-track courts, India is at 160th odd rank in ease of doing business in judicial reforms. If you move that, if you improve the speed of resolution of disputes, you will attract more investments. Like either if the bankers go to court, or the entrepreneur goes to court on bank, or they go to court on state government, or the local people go to court stopping this fellow from mining. There are so many ways the entire reserves are not being exploited because of the judicial system. Lack of speedy justice. So one of the things I would request the government of India to improve the export potential of the national mineral policy is to set up dedicated fast-track courts for this purpose, so that dispute resolution is resolved in 6 months. There should be a time frame for anything. If, like, when they say national emergency overrides, if you are hitting the foreign exchange of this country, you can't, a local person cannot hold the foreign exchange of the country to ransom just because he doesn't want to allow trucks through his village, or some banker doesn't want to give finance, or he wants to hold this. So if there is a fast track justice for national foreign exchange issues, at least on a trial basis, on this national new mineral policy, if they set up dedicated fast-track courts where any dispute is resolved within 180 days or 200 days, and that will definitely aid the...
And lastly and certainly of paramount importance, and that is the Make in India initiative. Mr. Raja, how will this policy further fortify the Make in India program?
As India, we are rich in minerals, but the only thing is our processing cost is very high. Now we are exporting the minerals and importing the finished goods. This is how we are lagging. So to promote the Make in India program, we have to process in India, and since its cost is very high, we have to spend time and money on the processing. We have to spend money on the R&D, how we can reduce the cost of process. That's how we can promote the Make in India.
So the focus has to be on R&D for processing and producing in India for furthering the Make in India initiative. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us. Certainly, this policy will ensure transparency and provide better regulation and enforcement. Well, that's all I had for you in this edition of Policy Watch from Visakhapatnam. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Rajya Sabha Television.